and welcome to this first day of the 30-day Yoga Asana challenge. Yoga postures are both physical and energetic in terms of the life energy that is stimulated through the practice of a Yoga Asana. Postures carry also with them a psycho-symbolic element. Some postures are based in symbolism, and some postures are perhaps more based in the psychological effect that they will bring about through the body and through the mind working in harmony together. Often we store or stash our emotions and our memories within our bodies, and they get locked into our bodies in the form of tension. Just as, for example, if perhaps we have some very stressful event coming up, we might get a headache, or we might get neck or shoulder ache if we've got a lot of worries or things on our minds. In that way, and in more complex ways, the brain, the mind, places emotions into the body. And yoga gives us an opportunity to release those old stored emotions, to release the residue of old events in our lives. At the same time as it generates energy flows within the body, especially through the spine, but there are many perceived channels of energy that run through the body according to yoga philosophy. And each one of those energies will have a physical strain to it, a physiological strain to it, and a psychological element and aspect to it. And so not only does yoga allow people to release things that are no longer serving them, tensions, the old energy that's locked into the body, but it allows them to engage with other states of mind, other emotional registers that are perhaps not easily accessible to them directly through the work of the mind, that they come in through the movement of the body, and in a sense exploring that very important relationship that we have in our lives, the one with our own body. And it tends not to be one that is much extrapolated in the modern, especially so-called Western European American worlds. Yoga tends to address that balance. It addresses it and redresses it. And this is one of the reasons why when we engage in a yoga practice, the effects are so very different from if we simply stretch and release after a workout. There's a whole different register and a whole different intention contained within Yoga Asana. Today's Yoga Asana that we're going to begin the challenge with is Uttanasana. And the Ut part means caution, care, carefulness, and also at the same time intensity. And the Tam part means stretch and opening, a lengthening simply. And asana, the word asana, which is so often simply transposed into the word posture or pose in English, that's not a translation at all of asana. Asana is really a sitting, a state of being seated. And I'll talk more about the meaning of asana and my understanding of the meaning of asana as we go through the challenge. But today, let's say that a posture should have that balance within it, that balance of work and ease, that makes it feel as if the individual who's practicing could simply be in sitting, simply be as at ease, working and yet at ease in the way that we can be when we're sitting. So we're looking for that quality within a posture. It's not in and of itself, an asana is not a challenge. In and of itself, an asana is not a quest or a goal or an aim. It's an experience. It's a state of being. It's a quality and an experience of a particular type of energy that our body is capable of experiencing, and which we can find in the world about us, in the universe about us. It will be also everywhere. It is in us, but it is also to be found everywhere else as well. So today, Uttanasana, our extreme care, our extreme intense stretch. The full practice of Uttanasana, which is a standing forward bend, needs to be undertaken with caution. If you have any herniated disc problems, then undertaking the full posture at the end of the practice would be contraindicated, as it would be with high blood pressure. But plenty of the rest of the practice should be accessible to you otherwise. So as we get towards the end, we'll think again about herniated discs and high blood pressure. Let's come onto the mat, and we're going to just a little bit, first of all, begin to breathe. If we let the spine be nice and long, so we can let the hips lift up and then broaden the pelvis out against the mat, and just relaxing the weight of the hips, right side, left side, as evenly into the mat as we can. And then letting the ribs and shoulders lift away from the floor and lengthening the waist out of the hips. And then let's bring the ribs back towards the mat, balancing the weight out between the right side of the ribs and the right shoulder, and the left sides of the ribs and the left shoulder. And then supporting the head with both hands. Let's just think about lengthening the spine from between the shoulder blades, and then again replacing the head towards the mat. And if there's a tendency for the back of the neck to arch quite a bit and the front of the chin to direct towards the ceiling, just think about putting a folded cloth or towel in underneath the back of the head so that the back of the neck can be long and released. Going to let the knees be bent and the soles of the feet in contact with the mat, about 2 fist distance apart between our feet, and we can let the arms just rest in an easy way, rolling outwards from the shoulder joints. Let's bring the awareness into our breath now. We're going to spend a few moments using a breath awareness exercise to both center our concentration and our energy to within our bodies, so that we have less distraction away from the practice that we're engaging with, but also because the particular breath practice that we're about to engage with will be helpful to us when we come into the main Uttanasana posture. Let's begin the breathing practice by thinking about the space between the eyes at the bridge of the nose, spending a few moments to let the mind's eye focus there in the space between the eyes. Just getting used to that space as the mind connects with the space between the eyes, just allowing that area to soften a little bit, to open, to expand. And next, allowing the awareness to travel to the space between the ears, with the awareness coming into the space between the ears again, allowing that space to simply soften, to relax. And then allowing the mind to come into the space at the back of the mouth. As the breath enters through the nostrils and arrives, cool breeze of air in the back of the mouth, just allowing the back of the mouth from the inside to open with the breath, and with the exhalations to just soften and to relax behind the breath. And then we'll let the awareness travel down into the throat. With the inhalation, allowing the breath as it moves into the throat to open the muscles of the throat from the inside. And as the breath leaves the body, passes back out through the throat, allowing the muscles of the throat, all the muscles through the neck to soften, to relax from the inside behind the breath. And then bringing the focus into the chest itself, with your next inhalation allowing the mind's focus to be in the upper chest. Of course, the breath will arrive all through the lungs, but let the mind's focus be in the upper chest. Breathing in, visualizing that the breath can open space behind the collarbones, out into the shoulder joints themselves, to cross the upper back just in behind the tops of the shoulder blades. Nice deep breath, forwards, sideways and back in the upper chest. And on the exhalations, we're going to let the breath begin at the top of the breath through the nostrils. So on the exhalation, breathing out through the nostrils, and then from the back of the mouth, from the upper chest, the mid-chest and the depth of the chest. Then bringing the focus of the inhalation to the mid-chest. On the inhalation, allowing the breath to open space away from the breastbone to either side of the rib cage, into the rib cage beneath the shoulder joints, and then also into the back of the rib cage, feeling the space between the base of the shoulder blades opening as the breath expands the back of the mid-chest. And then again, allowing the exhalation to leave from the top of the breath through the nostrils, then the back of the mouth, then the throat, upper chest, mid-chest, depth of the chest, the breath leaving. And finally, we're going to think about, with the inhalation, bringing the breath right down into the depth of the chest, into the region of the floating ribs. And the floating ribs are quite separated at the front of the body below the breastbone. So as we breathe into the depth of the chest, we need more to think in terms of breathing sideways, right side and left side down into the depth of the chest, and then back, so that you really breathe into the belly of the letter C shape that the floating ribs make, and around to the sides. And again, with the exhalations, allowing the breath to leave through the nostrils, the back of the mouth, the throat, upper chest, mid-chest, depth of chest. And keep coming back in your mind to that softening and releasing that we began this breath practice with, through the nostrils and then at the back of the mouth and through the throat. And allowing those regions to retain softness so that the breath remains easy. Although it's a deep breath and a directed breath, it nonetheless remains a relaxed breath. So we'll breathe one last time, allowing the breath to dive through easily the nostrils, the back of the mouth and the throat, and arriving nice and wide in the upper chest, forward, side, back, and the mid-chest, forward, side, back, and the floating ribs from the inside, a letter C shape, and then again the exhalation through the nostrils, back of the mouth, throat, upper chest, mid-chest, depth of chest. And at the end of the round of the breath that you're practicing at present, simply allowing the breath to fall back again now into a normal, easy pattern of breathing. We'll come back to that breath practice again later on, but for the moment we'll just allow the breath to flow easily, and we'll probably find as we work through the preliminary practice that the postures on the way through to our main posture, the Uttanasana, will also be changing and deepening and energizing the breath. To begin with, lengthen both legs away so that your thighs, knees, ankles are in alignment with the hip joints, and we're going to breathe in and lengthen downwards towards the right leg, push into the heel at the same time as stretching and lengthening the right arm up and back to alongside the ear, beside the head. And with the exhalation, relaxing on the right side of the body, letting go completely. Then the movement flows through on the left side, breathing in to stretch down towards the left heel and stretching the left arm back so that it comes alongside the ear, behind the head, And in between the stretch into the arm and the leg, the spine should also be opening and lengthening. And the exhalation to bring the arm back towards the side. So let's work through this practice, which is Asana, the full body yawn. Another 3 breaths to each side. An inhalation to really stretch through the right side. Try to feel the sides of the ribs, the waist and the outside of the hip also stretching. And exhalation to release and to relax on that side. Inhalation to stretch through on the left side, to reach through towards the heel, to really open up through the ribs, the waist, the outside of the left hip. And then again, exhalation to release on that side. So let's just flow through twice more to each side. Inhaling to work into the length of the posture, exhaling to relax away from it. Inhaling to lengthen into the left side of the practice, exhaling to relax away from it. Inhaling right side, trying to feel that your spine in the center of the body is also opening, and exhaling to relax. And a last round of the breath here, inhaling, lengthening on the left side, and once again, exhalation to relax the arm. From here, let's again bend the knees, and we'll hug underneath the backs of the knees, and then circling the legs at the hip joints 4 times, bringing the legs in towards the trunk of the body, then circling outwards and back together again. Exhalation to bring the legs in, inhalation as they move wide, and then exhalation, they're coming together and back in towards the abdomen. Inhaling, legs moving wide, exhalation back together and towards the abdomen. Reversing the circling action, legs move away, still together. Breathing in, they circle outwards. Exhalation, they come together and begin to move away. Breathing in, they circle outwards into the center. Breathing out, letting them move away. 2 more circling actions in this direction, keeping the range of movement as free and as open as possible, but also comfortable. And at the close of that circle, let's hold on to the right leg as we let the left foot come back towards the mat again. And here we keep the hands at the back of the right knee, the pressure of the hands coming onto the thigh bone at the back of the knee. We're going to aim to keep the tailbone pretty much in contact with the mat as we breathe out and hug the right leg in and towards us. And then as we breathe in, we're going to let that right leg extend to the ceiling and open the arms out and towards the sides. And then once again on the exhalation, hugging the right leg in and towards you, relaxing and broadening your back into the mat. And then with the inhalation, letting the leg extend away from the hips that maintain a nice, firm, solid contact with the mat beneath them. So again, exhalation to hug the right leg in, inhalation to stretch it up and away, widening the arms to the sides. 2 more breaths here. And then we have begun the practice of opening the back of the leg. And we're going to a little bit intensify that practice by lengthening the leg up again, but this time maintaining the leg in this raised position so that the hamstring muscles in the back of the thigh will begin to be a bit more stretched. And to do this, in order really for the hamstring opening to be effective, the lower back needs to stay on the mat. The hamstrings begin in the sitting bone. So if as we bring the leg forwards and towards us, the hips lift off the floor, in fact we're not really stretching a muscle that begins at the sitting bone and ends below the knee joint. We're basically just lifting the hips off the floor and bringing our leg closer towards us. So in order to actually open these muscles effectively, even though it may take a little while to get started with opening the hamstrings, aim to keep the back of the pelvis in contact with the floor and the tailbone in contact with the floor as well. It could be that our lengthening position begins with the right knee quite bent. And if that's the case, the use of a strap or any piece of fabric that can support the weight of the leg above the hip joint will be helpful. So here the practice is going to be with the exhalations, really allowing the back to soften into the mat, let the back of the neck relax, let the shoulders broaden, the ribs broaden against the mat, the waist and the hips and the spine soften against the mat. And then with the exhalation each time, let the lower abdomen draw down and back, and work to keep your back as soft and as relaxed as it was on the inhalation. And as soon as tension comes into the back, that's the point to stop stretching and lengthening the leg, because that's the point at which the body is no longer really opening the hamstrings in an aligned position, which means that in other positions the hamstring stretch that we've been working on won't really be very useful or effective. It would only be useful in that tensed position on the floor. So again, with our inhalation, allowing the back to be really soft and open against the mat, and then again with the exhalation, letting the back of the leg lengthen from the sitting bone through the muscles in the back of the thigh, towards the knee, towards the heel. Still aiming to keep the hips in contact with the mat, and then once again breathing in to soften the leg. We'll work through 2 more breaths doing this. Again, the knee doesn't need to absolutely straighten. It may do, it doesn't need to. And it will facilitate opening the back of the leg if we can stay really easy on the inside of the hip joint as well. If this area on the inside of the hip joint is gripping a lot, it will be hard for the leg to actually open and lengthen. And coming through. If you're more supple, then perhaps you might be holding the leg here. Again, I would suggest if you're holding the leg, still work to keep the neck and the shoulders very relaxed, because long term, if you're able to keep the upper back relaxed in these opening positions, the hamstrings will release more, and that's because the whole of the back of the body ultimately is connected, and there's a knock-on effect. If the neck and shoulders stay relaxed, it will ultimately help the back of the leg to relax as well. It's time to begin the second side, working with the left leg on the exhalation, keeping the back of the hips firmly in contact with the mat. We hug the left leg in towards the abdomen, and then again on the inhalation, lengthening through the back of the thigh towards the knee, then on towards the heel, and then once again on the exhalation, folding the leg in and down, hugging it towards the abdomen, letting the back really soften into the mat, letting the spine relax, and once again on the inhalation, really connect the opening action, connect it from the sitting bone through the thigh towards the back of the knee, on into the heel, and on the exhalation, folding in and down again. When the leg pushes straight up like this, a lot of the muscle fibers are bypassed in the muscles in the back of the thigh. And again, ultimately, we'll be able to find a lot more space in our body if we can connect the flow of the stretch from where the muscles begin at the sitting bone, let it pass through the thigh to the knee, on into the heel. We've got 1 more breath to go in the moving practice here. So exhalation to hug in and down, and the inhalation to lengthen up. And then on this side as well, coming into that more sustained opening practice for the hamstring. And all the same thoughts and ideas that we had about working this practice on the first side apply again here. We can use some support, and especially that's helpful for allowing the leg to relax, which is when it will be able to stretch more easily. If we can't straighten the leg in this position, it's a lot better to support it. The leg can relax more and it will gradually open more. And so once again with the inhalation, Just allowing the knee to bend more than otherwise, softening, letting go in the hip joint so there's a little bit of mobility still there at the hip joint. It's not rigidly held at the hip, and then letting the back relax into the mat, back of the hips soften into the mat, and then again opening from the sitting bone through the back of the leg towards the back of the knee on towards the heel. And once again, just a little bit of softening with the inhalation, checking in with the hip joint that it's still mobile and not too tense here. And then again on the exhalation, from the crown of the head right through the spine to the tailbone, let it soften. Shoulders and ribs stay broad and soft. Back of the waist, back of the hips, nice and relaxed. And this gradually connecting the lengthening through. So another couple of breaths to work here. Again, if you're a little bit more limber and you're able to work with holding the leg, I would still suggest a little bit of softening, checking in that the release is beginning at the hip joint each time, and on the exhalation, again, keep your back relaxed into the mat, spine passive, neck long, moving from the sitting bone towards the back of the knee, and then connecting towards the heel. And at the end of the round of the breath that we're on at the moment, we're going to fold the leg back in again and slide it away across the floor. And after those quite strong back of thigh opening practices, we can roll the legs inwards and outwards a couple of times, wobble the hips on the mat, also roll the arms inwards and outwards, wobble the ribs and shoulders on the mat, and gently release the head and neck towards one side and the other side a couple of times. Next, we're going to bring ourselves away from lying down and drawing through towards an all fours position. For our Uttanasana pose, we're going to need to have quite a nice long back, and we can begin to work on that with Yoga, this practice where from the all fours position we stretch the hips backwards, including the base of the spine and the tailbone, as if the tailbone might touch the wall behind us. And at the opposite end of the spine, at the crown of the head, we keep lengthening the crown of the head forwards, as if the crown might touch the wall in front of us. And in between the tailbone and the crown, the rest of the spine, ideally, should be stretching and lengthening. And then once again, on the inhalation, moving forwards. These kind of practices can be harsh on some people's knees, and that can be in two areas. It can be, for example, that the knees feel too hard on the floor, so we can always pop a folded blanket or a folded towel or anything that we prefer in underneath the knees to help with that. But it can also be that the stretch on the knee is too great. So when the thigh and the calf are together, the front of the knee is in its most opened position. If we just pop a rolled up towel or blanket into the back of the knee, we will not be opening the front of the knee as much. And that may allow us to stretch back a lot more comfortably, to go ultimately a little bit further, as the front of the knee perceives that it won't have to overstretch. If we have a cartilage injury or a knee injury, this may help as well. It's not just about muscles being tight, but the knee should stay comfortable in the practice. Sometimes as well, for people, the issue is at the front of the foot, and because the ankle isn't stretching and opening quite as much as it needs to facilitate the arrival at the fully extended position. And again, we can roll something up and just pop it in underneath the ankle to enable us to flow a little bit more freely. we're working with an inhalation to come forwards and an exhalation to move back. As we're moving back, in order to be able to keep the spine quite long, because often it will in fact round in the upper spine, there needs to be a conscious focus on releasing the muscles on the outside of the rib cage, letting our shoulder blades stay quite wide, but also very much down the back of the rib cage, so that we've got more chance of opening the shoulder joints as we're moving. And eventually, on one of these practices, as we lengthen back, keeping as much awareness on opening the spine as we can, keeping the muscles around the sides of the ribs as soft as we can, we're going to aim to hold in this fully extended position. And as we hold here, it's Shashankasana, the hare pose. It might be that the lengthening and opening that's required in the lower back is a little great to maintain the position, and again we might need to put a little bit of support in underneath the front of the chest. I've got a yoga brick to help me with that. It can be quite a good height for many people to support them, but if you don't happen to have a yoga brick or a yoga block, then again any pillow or towel, or just something that supports the body away from the floor at the chest will be fine. In this position, we might come back again to the breathing practice that we worked with earlier, thinking about the nostrils and the back of the mouth and the throat being open to receive the breath, and then allowing the breath to direct out across the collarbones, into the shoulder joints and back towards the upper back. Feeling also on the inhalations that the chest can widen away from the breastbone and out into the region around the shoulder joints, below the shoulder joints and back. And that the breath can widen again into the floating ribs and back. And that with the exhalations, we're breathing out from the top of the breath, from the nostrils, through the back of the mouth, through the throat, upper chest, mid-chest, depth of chest. With this really wide inhalation in this position, just allowing your shoulder joints to be soft enough that you can feel the effect of the wide breath across the upper chest. You may be able to feel how the breath opens a little bit of space around the spine, especially the thoracic spine. But there will be some opening lower down into the lumbar spine and the base of the spine. And on the exhalations, when you're breathing out from the top of the breath, you may be able to feel how the spine itself is capable of relaxing, allowing the spinal processes on the back of the spine to soften downwards towards the tailbone, and just keep releasing weight into the crown of the head. So let the chin stay tucked down. As you come through to a last breath here, just allowing the body to gradually come away from that posture, just rolling up and away from the Shashankasana. You may be fine in kneeling, rolling up fine in kneeling, or you may feel that you need to come up, bringing the weight away from the knees. We're going to spend a moment to open the soles of the feet a little bit so that they will be more relaxed when we're standing. And it could be from the all fours position that you feel quite a lot of stretch here already, or you might be able to come back more before the stretch becomes too strong. If your feet are quite supple and you're used to foot opening practices, then you may be able to come up into the kneeling with the toes tucked under, just trying to keep in alignment, hips, knees, ankles in this position. I recommend caution with opening the feet, that we're opening muscles between very small bones. We don't need to overdo that. Just keep the balance between the muscles and the bones in the feet, and gradually coming into these opening practices. From here, we're going to come up to standing to move on to stronger practice, getting closer to our apex posture, the Uttanasana. Returning to the practice in standing now, and to get us used to standing again, let's lengthen the body here. We're breathing in, tailbone can sink down, stretching right up into the arms. With the exhalation again, bringing the arms back to the sides. Again, inhalation and an exhalation. And just as when we were working the stretch to either side when we were lying on the mat, allowing this movement of the arms stretching up to help us really open up through the spine between the tailbone and the crown. And exhalation. And a last round of the breath. The Uttanasana practice involves a forward bend. And in the forward bend, ideally, we will avoid such a strong position on the spine that, for example, we can see all the spinal processes pushing up and forwards. As we come into the forward bend, ideally, we need the spinal processes to recede as much as possible within the musculature of the back. This is going to be better for the spine in any case. There's no reason to overstretch the spine, the joints of the spine. If we open the ligaments or the tendons that support the spine, this will ultimately long-term cause the spine to be too loose and liable to injury. What we're really aiming to stretch and open are the muscles at the backs of the legs. So it's the angle of the pelvis coming forwards that is crucial to opening the muscles in the backs of the legs. It will also release the lower back muscles to the extent that we need to release to come into our forward bend practice. So let's initially begin to consider the angle on the pelvis to facilitate that movement forwards. And we can do that by going in the direction that we don't really need to go in. So tucking the tailbone under and just a little bit, drawing it forwards. And then moving the base of the spine, and the pelvis of course moves with the base of the spine because it's attached to it, but moving the base of the spine backwards. So what we may see is mainly the hips moving first of all forwards, and then the hips moving backwards. But of course the carriage of the hips is carrying the base of the spine, the sacrum and the tailbone. And it will be helpful as we come into the forward bend if, as we practice the alignment at the base of the spine, we retain a consciousness of the alignment through the upper spine. So letting the back of the shoulders and the ribs and the back of the head be tall whilst the base of the spine moves backwards and forwards. And little by little, the idea is to come into a position where the tailbone will be directed towards the heels and the crests of the hip bones forwards. And that's the angle at which we'll aim to try and tip the hips forwards. So the idea as we come into the forward bend is that we support the pelvis sufficiently with lower abdominal strength, a bit of hollowing in the lower abdomen above the pubic bone and out towards the crests of the hip bones, a lift potentially in the muscles directly above the tailbone, so that when the weight of the pelvis is supported away from the thighs, the tops of the thigh bones, the balls of the thigh bones, we'll be able to hinge the pelvis forward, keep the lower abdominal muscles lifted, and coming into this forward bending position, forward flexion, with the spine quite long and supported. We can come through to a position like this with the hands on the thighs to support us, and working here as we breathe in, really reaching or aiming the sitting bones back and behind us as we keep the spine lengthening forwards. We should feel some opening through the backs of the legs here. And then again, just allowing that to relax a little bit with the knees bending, the tailbone reaches back, abdomen stays powerfully lifted, and the backs of the legs open upwards from the heels towards the sitting bones. Or we can take support from a chair or something else that will allow us to be able to be a little bit more relaxed. So just allowing the chair to receive the weight that it's too tiring for the body to hold. Although as much as possible we try to contain the strength that we need for the posture within the body itself. So the practice where we are at present might bring us through to Ardha Uttanasana, so the half Uttanasana, the half extreme calf stretch, in which we would have again this lengthened position through the arms, over the shoulder joints, back through the sides of the rib cage, the abdominal muscles nice and strong and lifted, and the tailbone opening backwards and the crown of the head lengthening as far forwards in the opposite direction as possible. And the idea is to keep the spine as long as possible and to let the legs gradually open in conjunction with the spine being long. So we could inhale, let the knees soften and really align the angle on the pelvis and the stretch through the spine, and then a powerful lift on the exhalation in the lower abdominal muscles, keeping the feet anchored to the floor and seeing how much it's possible to lengthen upwards from the heels through the backs of the legs to the sitting bones, at the same time as keeping our spine long. And the point at which the spine would round, that's really the point to stop opening the legs, because that's the point at which the sitting bones are travelling in the direction of the back of the knee, and in reality we're stretching our back, overstretching our spine, and the emphasis has moved away from the hamstrings into stretching the lower back and the spine. And after a few breaths here, it will become tiring, and it's time then to walk the feet in towards the chair. Abdominal muscles stay strong, breathing in to roll up through the spine. Or if you held onto your thighs throughout that, just simply rolling up through the spine. That's the half Uttanasana, and up to there, in this practice, anyone with herniated disc or high blood pressure is fine to practice. And you could return again to the Ardha Uttanasana practice, which is a very useful and opening and strengthening practice for the body. Or if you feel ready to come into the full Uttanasana, we're going to have a look at that now. If you have yoga blocks or bricks, these are bricks, or a pile of books is just as good for supporting you in the forward bend if you think that you won't necessarily reach the floor. All the things that we've been working with up to this point, we're going to bring into practice now. Let's just think about the soles of the feet, letting the weight through the feet be nice and even. Weight through the centre of the heel, ball of the foot, and pad of the little toe. Thinking again about the angle through the pelvis, just allowing the tailbone to be sinking and the crests of the hips lifted. Considering the strength that we need in the lower abdomen and around the waist and around the rib cage to carry the trunk of the body forwards. Lifting a little through the fronts of the thighs, so that we'll be able to let go more through the backs of the thighs. And then again with the knees a little bit bent, keeping the lower abdomen lifted, the navel pulling to the spine, going to allow the pelvis to hinge forward at the hip, keeping as much space and length between the tailbone and the crown as we can, using the abdominal muscles to support us. Adjusting strength in the upper back, also to support us. The shoulder blades need to be wide across the back of the rib cage, and the points of the shoulder blades moving in the direction of the sitting bones. Let your rib cage keep gathering in towards your spine at the back, at the sides, and the breastbone and the spine moving towards each other, strength also at the front. And little by little, the movement allows the hips to hinge at the pelvis, the spine essentially to travel forwards and downwards. So we can be coming through with a lot more bend at the knees than that, just as we practiced it in the half position As we move further downwards, as we breathe in, letting the knees soften, let the insides of the thighs keep lengthening forwards towards your knees from the insides of the hip joints. So the pelvic, the hip joints still stay mobile. And then again, you're lifting the sitting bones upwards, lengthening from between the heels towards the sitting bones, and keeping the spine moving forwards. There are lots of different ways to approach the practice as we come to this more advanced position. We can still be holding bricks or blocks, or if we become more flexible, we let them go a little bit lower. You might consider supporting the head on a brick or a block. That's sometimes quite relaxing and allows the body to let go a little bit more as you take weight out of the practice. What will additionally help with that, as I turn around to show you, is if the shoulder blades are bunched up towards the shoulders and towards the head. This is not helpful for opening. Keeping the shoulder blades wide and moving up the back, keeping the rib cage broad and wide and the pelvis broad and wide, simply facilitates the passage of the spine through the rest of the bone structure of the body and allows you to lengthen in easily a lot more than otherwise. The practice can also come from the feet, allowing the body to soften from the feet, just bringing the awareness into the feet, relaxing the feet, lengthening the toes away from the rest of the sole of the foot, just gradually releasing upwards towards the sitting bones. Navel pulling to the spine on the exhalations and the spine releasing forwards and downwards. And the breath here as well can work really wide, the way we practiced earlier, broadening the breath out across the collarbones into the shoulder joints, back towards the shoulder blades, wide into the mid-rib cage, back into the floating ribs, and as you exhale, breathing out from the top of the breath. And that wide breath is really effective for opening space. Even though it opens the upper back more, it helps the rest of the body to release. And then eventually it's time to come out of Uttanasana, and I would recommend allowing your knees to bend, nice deep lift in the abdominal muscles. Quickly allow the weight of the arms to drop back towards the sides of the body. Bring the tailbone above the heels so the sitting bones sink downwards and begin to pull forwards. And then rebuilding your spine segment by segment, let the weight of each vertebra build on the one below, keeping the mind in your spine, just tracking right through to the crown of the head, and at the top of the movement, allowing the arms to relax. And that was Uttanasana, one of the cornerstone postures of the yoga practice. Notably, it's not called hamstring stretch in the yoga term, and it really is about the whole of the body, keeping the feet soft and grounded, experiencing the back of the body opening from the soles of the feet, through the backs of the legs, across the back of the hips, through the back and into the crown of the head. All of that region is the back of the body. It's very releasing. It tends to bring the mind into the back of the body. We always tend to be so forwards in our bodies, at the front of our bodies, and not so connected with the back of the body. But when in difficult situations, either physically or mentally or emotionally, we're able to just simply allow our brain to drop back into the depth of our body, we'll often find resources that we didn't know were there. Resources that are buried in our consciousness but which are not immediately to hand. Uttanasana, although all the forward bends tend to stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system, the nervous system that relaxes us, after the Uttanasana, I think there is quite a release of energy through the body. The energy that yoga works with is prana, the life energy. And the prana is divided into different strains of life energy called vayu. And the one that Uttanasana tends to stimulate more is the Udana vayu, and that's the upward energy stream or quality of energy. And I think there is a little bit of an uplift actually after Uttanasana, although in many ways it feels like a downwards moving posture, but actually the energy it releases is more of an upwards energy. We should counterpose to release the body after the practice, and what might be a nice counterpose is Baddha Konasana, Supta Baddha Konasana, just allowing the weight of the hips to come onto the mat and allowing the spine to lengthen it towards the floor. You might find it helpful to have support to the outside of the hip joints, again blankets or cushions or pillows would do that, as well as yoga bricks, or you might not have support to the outsides of the hip joints. And again, if there's a tendency to arch in the neck, just pop something in underneath the back of the head so that the back of the neck can stay long and released. And here at the end of our Uttanasana practice, simply allowing the body to let go, allowing the weight of the body to be received by the support that the earth beneath offers it. Feeling the points of contact that the body has with the mat or the earth beneath it. And with the exhalations, just allowing the connection between the body and the earth to intensify through each and every point of contact. Feeling how it may be possible to give the weight of the body away to the support beneath. As the body relaxes and softens, muscular effort, muscular tension drains away, you may feel the effects of the practice really absorbed through the body. As the body has grown in heaviness, seeing if it's possible to begin to as well connect with any lightness that there may be within the body at present. The lightness of the movement of the breath coming in and coming out. The chest gently rising with the inhalation. The space that there is within the body here at present. Any lightness in the spaciousness that lingers behind the yoga practice. Spending a moment to allow the mind to connect with the entire, the length and breadth and depth of space that is the physical body. And in this moment, owning and acknowledging any peace that there may be, any sense of oneness or union that there may be anywhere through the body, through the mind, through the being. And gradually bringing a little bit of movement back into the toes and into the fingers. Bringing a little bit of movement back into the feet and into the hands. If the legs are still in the butterfly position, allowing the legs to come back into alignment with the hip joints. And we let the legs lengthen right away from us. Stretching down into the legs, stretching up back into the arms. Just checking in with the muscles around the spine, feeling them engage. Feeling all through the back muscles, into the arms, into the legs, awakening. Letting the sense of sight move outwards again. Sense of hearing move out into the wider distance again.
just knowing the sensations over the surface of the body, the boundaries of the physical body, so that we're well prepared for moving out and about again into the physical world that surrounds us. And we'll hug the legs in towards the front of the body and circling the hips on the mat 2 or 3 times one direction, 2 or 3 times in the opposite direction, releasing the back. And then, as you're ready, rolling over, coming onto one side and resting on the side for a moment. And then away from the side, just rolling up through the spine, back towards a seated position. Om Shanti Namaste. Well done, and thank you for watching. See you again next time on the second day of the 30-day Yoga Asana Challenge.